You know, there is a specific kind of silence that falls over a room when a predator realizes they just walked into a trap. It's not a quiet silence, it's a heavy one, thick with the sudden, crushing weight of regret. That's exactly what I was thinking when this crazy HOA lady showed up at my door demanding $3,500 for a mailbox she didn't like. My wife, Sarah, just looked at this woman and said, "No." Just like that. No yelling, no arguing, just a calm, flat no. The woman, let's call her Brenda, practically lost her mind. She called the cops on us, screaming about theft of services and community violations. I'm standing there freaking out, wondering if I'm about to be arrested in my own driveway. But when the officer finally shows up, he takes one look at my wife and goes completely white. He drops his notepad, takes a step back, and stammers, "Judge, you live here." The look of pure, unadulterated horror on Brenda's face. Chef's kiss. But stick around, because this story has a twist that nobody, and I mean nobody, saw coming. Let me paint you a picture of where we live. We're talking about one of those pristine, gated suburban developments where the grass is so green it looks fake, and every driveway is lined with cars that cost more than my first college tuition. It's the kind of place where people don't just live, they perform. My wife, Sarah, and I had just moved into this place, a sprawling $2.5 million estate that we honestly pinched ourselves every morning for owning. I'm Mark, by the way, a software architect, and Sarah, well, Sarah is the impressive one. We moved here for the peace and quiet. We wanted the 3-car garage and the manicured gardens. What we didn't sign up for was a homeowners association president who thought she was running a small, totalitarian country. I work from home most days, which means I usually have a front row seat to the neighborhood theatrics. Usually, it's low-stakes stuff. Someone's garbage can is 2 inches too close to the curb, or there's a heated debate on the community app about whether antique white and cream are the same color. It's petty, but it's usually harmless. But that Tuesday morning was different. It was exactly 7 a.m. I hadn't even finished my first cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. Not a friendly ding-dong, but 2 sharp, authoritative blasts, like someone was serving a warrant. I was upstairs, so I heard Sarah answer the door. Now, you have to understand something about my wife. Sarah is the calmest human being I have ever met. I have seen her handle life-or-death crises with the composure of a Zen master. So, when I came down the stairs and saw her leaning against the doorframe, sipping her tea, looking completely relaxed while this woman on our porch turned purple, I knew something was up. The woman was Brenda Vance. She was wearing a navy blue blazer with gold buttons that looked like she was cosplaying a yacht club commodore, and she was clutching a clipboard so tight her knuckles were white. "I am Brenda Vance," she announced, and her voice had that nasal, piercing quality that cuts right through you. "President of the Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association. Your property is currently in violation of 17 separate community standards. The total fine comes to $3,500. She said it with the confidence of someone who has never been told no in her entire life. I'm standing behind Sarah, watching this unfold, thinking, "Lady, you have absolutely no idea who you are talking to." Sarah just smiled. It was her patient smile, the one she uses when she's dealing with a toddler who doesn't want to eat their vegetables. "Could you show me," Sarah asked softly, "exactly which municipal code grants the HOA that specific authority?" I swear I saw Brenda's left eye twitch. Most people, when hit with a fine like that, panic. They ask, "What violations?" Or, "Can we work out a payment plan?" They don't ask for the legal foundation of the claim. Even I could tell Brenda wasn't expecting pushback. "I don't need to quote municipal codes," Brenda snapped, flipping a page on her clipboard with aggressive flair. "I am the code here. Let's go down the list, shall we? $2,000 for unauthorized landscape modifications. Your roses are the wrong shade of pink, by the way. $1,000 for an unapproved mailbox design. We require bronze. Yours is matte black. And $500 in processing fees for having the audacity to move into this neighborhood without scheduling an orientation with me first." She rattled it off like she was reading a diner menu. The whole time, she's looking past Sarah into our house, like she's already calculating what furniture she's going to take when we can't pay. That's when our neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, stepped out onto her porch. Mrs. Higgins is this tiny, elderly woman who probably weighs 90 pounds soaking wet, but she's lived here since the place was built. She caught Sarah's eye and mouthed something. I didn't catch it at first, but then she walked over to her hedge, pretending to water a fern, and whispered loud enough for us to hear. She destroyed the Morgan family with these tactics, Mrs. Higgins whispered, looking terrified. They had to sell their house for half its value just to get away from her. Be careful. Mrs. Higgins scurried back inside like a frightened mouse, but the message was received loud and clear. We weren't the first victims. This wasn't about rules, it was a shakedown. I was getting frustrated. I stepped up beside Sarah. Honey, I muttered, just tell her. Tell her what you do. Because here's the thing, Sarah isn't just a lawyer. She's a federal district judge. She presides over cases involving organized crime, massive fraud, and government corruption. Dealing with a suburban HOA tyrant should have been beneath her. But Sarah just gave me a look, that sharp, analytical look she gets when she's solving a complex puzzle, and said quietly, no. Let me see how deep this rabbit hole goes. She turned back to Brenda. Has this assessment been ratified by a majority vote per the Davis-Sterling Act? Now, I don't know much about HOA law, but I know the look of someone who has been caught bluffing. Brenda froze. For about 3 seconds, the mask slipped. She looked confused, maybe even a little scared. Well, we follow all proper procedures, Brenda stammered, recovering quickly. The point is, these violations need to be addressed immediately. You have 48 hours to pay the fines, or we will be forced to escalate to the next level of enforcement. The way she said next level made it sound like she had a sniper team in the bushes. Sarah nodded thoughtfully, like she was considering a business proposal. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. I'd like to review the documentation you mentioned, particularly the sections that outline the association's authority to impose these specific penalties. She was being so polite, so reasonable, that Brenda didn't even realize she was being dissected. Brenda puffed up her chest, feeling victorious. You know, Brenda said with a smirk as she turned to leave, most people try to fight these charges at first. They yell, they scream, but they all pay in the end. It's so much easier when residents just understand their place in the community structure. She turned and clicked her heels down our driveway, radiating smugness. Sarah watched her go, her expression unreadable. As soon as the door clicked shut, Sarah pulled out her phone and immediately started photographing the documents Brenda had shoved into her hand. Honey, I said, what are you doing? Why didn't you just flash the badge and send her packing? Sarah looked up, and for a moment, I saw a flash of cold, hard steel in her eyes. Mark, that woman thinks she found another easy mark. She Googled our property value, saw the name, and assumed I'm just another trophy wife she can bully. She walked toward her home office with a purposeful stride. What Brenda doesn't realize is that she isn't just running a scam. She's committing federal crimes. And she just handed me the first piece of evidence. She picked up her phone and dialed a number I didn't recognize. Hi, this is Judge Dawson, she said, her voice dropping an octave into her courtroom tone. I need you to pull some files for me. Yes, immediately. I stood there in the kitchen, my coffee cold, watching my wife transform from a suburban homeowner into a force of nature. I realized then that our quiet Tuesday morning was actually the opening shot of a war, and Brenda Vance had absolutely no idea she was fighting a nuclear power. 3 days later, Brenda was back, and she brought reinforcements. I've seen entitled behavior before, but this was on another level. Brenda marched up our driveway at 8 a.m., flanked by a guy carrying a briefcase that looked more expensive than my first car, and a contractor who wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. Oh, and the fine? It had miraculously grown. It was no longer $3,500. It was now $8,000. Because apparently, in Brenda's world, inflation runs at about 1,000% a day. Mrs. Dawson, Brenda announced, standing on our porch like she was delivering a papal decree. Your continued noncompliance has escalated this matter significantly. She handed Sarah a document that looked terrifyingly official. Heavy bond paper, embossed seal, intimidating legal jargon. The board has voted to impose additional penalties, Brenda said, reciting from the script. $2,000 in late fees, $1,500 in attorney consultation fees, and $1,000 in lien preparation costs. I'm watching this from the hallway, and I can practically see the gears turning in Sarah's head. She's looking at this fake document with the same intensity she uses when sentencing a cartel boss. This is fascinating, Sarah said softly. Could you walk me through the specific statutes that authorize these particular penalties? I'm curious about the procedural due process here. Most people would ask, how can I pay this? Sarah was asking for the legal architecture of the scam. Before Brenda could answer, a man walked up the driveway. It was Mike Vasquez. He lives 3 houses down. Nice guy, quiet. His brother is a cop in the precinct. Mike is actually on the HOA board, but he's the kind of guy who just wants to make sure the pool stays clean. Mike looked furious. Brenda, Mike interrupted, his voice shaking a little. I don't remember the board voting on these penalties. In fact, I don't remember us having a board meeting at all this week. The silence on the porch was deafening. Brenda spun around, her eyes wide. Mike, this is an executive matter. You don't need to be involved. I'm the treasurer, Brenda, Mike said, crossing his arms. If we're fining people, I need to know. And since when do we have the authority to impose late fees without a 30-day notice period? You could see the panic starting to crack Brenda's foundation. Mike wasn't just a neighbor, he was a witness. He was an insider blowing her cover in real time. Sarah seized the moment. I'd like to request a formal HOA board meeting to discuss my payment options, she said. She sounded like a sweet, confused neighbor, but it was a trap. She was forcing Brenda into a public forum. I believe the bylaws require 7 days' notice for all residents to attend. I'd like everyone to be there so I can understand the community standards fully. Brenda looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. That won't be necessary, she stammered. These matters are typically handled privately. Translation, please don't make me commit fraud in front of an audience. I insist, Sarah said, smiling. I want to be a good neighbor. Brenda had no choice. She agreed to the meeting, grabbed her contractor, and practically ran to her car. That Saturday, the community center was packed. Sarah showed up with a simple manila folder. Brenda showed up with a stack of binders and an attitude. It was a bloodbath. Sarah didn't yell. She didn't make a speech. She just asked questions. She asked about the ratification process. She asked about the specific bank accounts where the fines were deposited. She asked about the audit trail. Brenda fumbled. She lied. She contradicted herself. Mike Vasquez backed Sarah up on every point, confirming that none of these procedures were standard. By the end of the meeting, half the neighborhood was looking at Brenda with suspicion, and the board voted to suspend all pending assessments until a full review could be conducted. We walked back to the car, and I felt like celebrating. You got her, I said. She's done. Sarah shook her head, looking back at the community center where Brenda was arguing with a man in a baseball cap. No, Mark. She's not done. She's desperate. And desperate people are dangerous. Why didn't you just tell them you're a judge? I asked again. Sarah stopped walking. Because this isn't just about us. Brenda has been doing this for years. She targets new families, minorities, elderly people, anyone she thinks won't fight back. She's stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars. If I just flash my badge, she backs off us and finds a new victim next week. I'm not here to win an argument. I'm here to build a RICO case. That night, Sarah laid it all out for me. She had been in contact with state investigators. Brenda wasn't working alone. She had a network. Corrupt city officials fabricating code violations. Shady contractors giving inflated estimates for required repairs. And the muscle? That was Detective Holloway. I'd seen Holloway around the neighborhood. He was a local detective, but he always looked like he'd slept in his car. He drove a flashy car for a cop, and he always seemed to be lurking whenever Brenda was putting the squeeze on someone. On Tuesday, Holloway showed up at our door. If Brenda was the velvet glove, Holloway was the iron fist. He stood on our porch, hand resting near his service weapon, looking me up and down like I was a suspect. Mrs. Dawson, Holloway said when Sarah came to the door. I've received reports of harassment directed toward community officials. Residents are concerned your resistance to standards might escalate into something more serious. It was a threat. Plain and simple. Comply, or we find a reason to arrest you. Sarah stepped out onto the porch. She didn't look intimidated. She looked bored. Detective Holloway, she said. I'm curious about your department's jurisdiction over civil HOA disputes. Under what specific statute are you investigating alleged harassment between neighbors? Holloway blinked. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, he growled, dropping the pretense. Pay the fines. Follow the rules. Keep fighting, and things get complicated. Sarah smiled. It was a predatory smile. Detective, are you familiar with USC Title 18, Section 1962? It covers civil rights violations committed under the color of law. Specifically, officers who use their authority to further a criminal enterprise. Holloway went white. I think there's been a misunderstanding, he muttered, backing away. I'm also curious, Sarah continued, her voice hard as diamond, about your internal affairs case file, number IA 2023-47. The one involving unauthorized use of department resources? Holloway practically ran to his car. He peeled out of the driveway so fast he left rubber on the asphalt. How did you know that? I asked, stunned. I have friends in the bureau, she said. Holloway isn't just a dirty cop. He's the enforcer for the whole ring. He falsifies police reports to justify foreclosures on homes Brenda targets. They steal the houses, flip them, and split the profit. The next few days were a blur of activity. Our house became the command center. Mrs. Higgins brought over years of documentation she'd been hiding. Mike Vasquez brought financial records. Neighbors we'd never met started coming out of the woodwork, sharing stories of intimidation and theft. It was organized crime, operating in broad daylight, disguised as a neighborhood watch. Then came the text message. It was from an unknown number, sent to my phone. Mrs. Dawson needs to understand that some problems require permanent solutions. Pay tomorrow or face consequences. I showed it to Sarah, terrified. She just smiled. Perfect. They just graduated from civil fraud to federal wire intimidation. They just gave us the last piece of the puzzle. The trap was set for Friday. Brenda called Sarah that morning. Mrs. Dawson, she said, her voice dripping with toxic sweetness. I'm bringing an independent verification officer to your property this afternoon. Officer Vasquez will be conducting an official assessment. His documentation will be definitive. I hope you'll be cooperative. Sarah hung up and looked at me. She called Officer Vasquez. Mike's brother. Is he dirty too? I asked. No, Sarah said. He's one of the good ones. I've had him testify in my court a dozen times. He's straight as an arrow. Brenda made a mistake. She thinks because she has Holloway in her pocket, all cops will back her up. She doesn't know who I am, and she doesn't know Officer Vasquez knows who I am. Around 3 p.m., the circus arrived. Brenda pulled up in her SUV, looking triumphant. Holloway was there too, lurking in his patrol car, probably there to ensure the intimidation stuck. They had a van full of witnesses, probably other members of the scam. But the neighborhood was ready. Mrs. Higgins was on her porch with a camera. Mike Vasquez was washing his car, listening. We had witnesses everywhere. Officer Vasquez pulled up in his squad car. He stepped out, adjusting his belt, looking like he was just responding to a standard civil dispute call. Brenda rushed over to him. Officer, thank you for coming. Mrs. Dawson has been threatening officials and refusing to comply with legal standards. We need a report filed immediately. She pointed at our house like it was a crack den. Officer Vasquez nodded professionally. I'll need to get statements from all parties. Sarah opened the front door. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, holding a coffee mug. She walked down the driveway. Holloway was smirking in the background. Brenda was beaming. Officer Vasquez turned to take Sarah's statement. He looked at her. He stopped. He tilted his head. Then, his eyes went wide. His jaw literally dropped. Wait, Officer Vasquez said, his voice cracking. He took a step back, taking his hat off instinctively. Judge Parker? You live here. The silence that followed was absolute. Brenda's face went slack. Judge, she repeated, her voice trembling. What judge? She's just a housewife. Ma'am, Officer Vasquez said, turning to Brenda, his tone shifting from polite to icy. This is Federal District Judge Julie Parker. I've testified in her courtroom. She handles federal racketeering cases. You could actually see the moment Brenda's soul left her body. Holloway, standing by his car, looked like he was having a stroke. Sarah didn't miss a beat. Officer Vasquez, she said, her voice commanding the entire street. I believe this situation requires federal coordination. I have documented evidence of criminal conspiracy, wire fraud, and civil rights violations under the color of law. She handed him a thick folder. Detective Holloway has been using his authority to intimidate residents. Miss Vance has been operating a fraud scheme involving hundreds of thousands of dollars. I suggest you contact the FBI field office immediately. Brenda started screaming. I didn't know. I didn't know she was anyone important. I was just enforcing the rules. That's the problem, Brenda, Sarah said calmly. You only care about justice when you think the person matters. but everyone matters. Suddenly, the street was filled with unmarked sedans. FBI agents and windbreakers poured out from where they'd been staking out the neighborhood. They'd been watching the whole time, waiting for Sarah's signal. Agent Miller, the lead investigator, walked up. "Kayla Sanders, aka Brenda Vance," he said. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and RICO violations." Holloway tried to get into his car, but 2 agents blocked him. "Detective, you're coming with us too." Civil rights violations under color of law. As they handcuffed Brenda, she looked back at our house, tears streaming down her face, the reality of 18 to 20 years in federal prison crashing down on her. The aftermath was like a cleansing rain. Brenda, Kayla Sanders, pled guilty. She got 18 years. Holloway got 12. The corrupt city officials were indicted. The HOA was dissolved and placed under state receivership until a new, honest board could be elected, with Mike Vasquez as president. The money was recovered. Mrs. Higgins got a check. The families who lost their homes got restitution. Our neighborhood changed overnight. People came out of their houses. We had block parties. The fear was gone. 6 months later, I was sitting on the porch with Sarah. It was quiet. A real, peaceful quiet. "You know," I said, "you could have just told her day one." Sarah took a sip of her wine. "I could have, but then she would have just moved on to someone else." Justice isn't about protecting yourself, Mark. It's about stopping the bad guys so they can't hurt anyone else. I looked at my wife, the federal judge, the dragon slayer of Meadowbrook Heights, and I realized I was the luckiest man alive. So, here's the lesson, folks. Be careful who you bully. You never know when the quiet housewife next door is the one person with the power to burn your entire world to the ground. And if an HOA president ever shows up at your door with a clipboard and an attitude, ask for the statute. And maybe, just maybe, check to see if your spouse is secretly a federal judge. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever dealt with an HOA tyrant? And how did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of justice served cold. Stay safe out there.